This is Michael Popok, Legal AF. Ever wonder what America would look like under Ron DeSantis? Well, look no further than Florida, where that little experiment is going horribly awry in unconstitutional and unpatriotic ways. Latest example, Ron DeSantis signed a law that's going to take effect on July 1st, just in time for the 4th of July, everybody. That is an unconstitutional attack on people based on their ethnicity or national origin. You heard it right, folks. The alien land law in Florida will prevent, if it's not stopped by a federal judge, the Department of Justice, will prevent people from China, Venezuela, and Cuba from owning property, buying property and owning property in America, like a deed restriction that we got rid of in the 1930s against people like Jews and blacks. But Ron DeSantis, not knowing anything about history, decides he's going to do it all again. America first. He's going to prevent Chinese, Venezuelan, and Cubans who happen to still be citizens of those countries, maybe here on some sort of immigration status, from owning property that's too close, within 10 miles of some sort of critical infrastructure or military base. Now that sounds pretty, some people might be thinking, well, that sounds pretty good. Let's keep those dirty fill in the blanks away from our military bases and critical infrastructure. But I got news for you. The federal government already monitors investment of foreign nationals and others. And they've done it since the 1960s and 1970s. And so this law not only violates equal protection under the U.S. Constitution, promotes discrimination under the Fair Housing Act that you can imagine, of people who are not even of foreign resident status, but are Americans of Chinese descent, Venezuelan descent, Cuban descent, right? Who are now going to be discriminated against landlords who are like, well, I don't really want to figure out your immigration status. You look Chinese to me, so I'm not going to sell you that property. That's discrimination. That's equal protection. That's due process. But it also violates the supremacy clause of the U.S. Constitution, because it is the federal government that's responsible for national security, for treaties, for foreign relations, not state by state. Another time that Ron DeSantis fell asleep in class during the study of the Constitution. And the supremacy clause, there's already federal legislation and federal scheme that completely regulates in the area of foreign people's investment in American assets. We already have programs, which means if the federal government has legislated in an area in which it is supreme, all state law gets ousted, right? Gets vacated, gets pushed aside. And that is the supremacy clause attack on this body of law as well. And if you want to know what the federal government does every day about foreign investment, we already have the Foreign Investment in the U.S. Act, FIUS, or CFIUS, C-F-I-U-S. It's run by the Committee on Foreign Investment in the U.S. And we have OFAC, which is the Office of Foreign Asset Control under the Treasury Department. Between OFAC and CFIUS, and a body of law, because the federal government loves acronyms, the Foreign Investment Risk Record Monetization Act, or FIRMA, F-I-R-R-M-A. Between all of those, they're already regulating in this area. So we don't need, Ron DeSantis unconstitutionally, unpatriotically barring and banning people of different descent, national origin from owning property. I mean, the last time I heard about something like this was a dark chapter in American history, which led to a case in the U.S. Supreme Court called Karamatsu, in which Japanese Americans and people of Japanese descent were put in concentration camps, which were conveniently called internment camps, all around America after the Pearl Harbor attack, because Americans were really scared. And when Americans are scared, fear is such an overwhelmingly powerful human emotion that makes Americans and other people in other countries do really despicable things. And we could sit here and do an entire hot take about how fear of the other leads countries to do terrible things. Usually it leads to ethnic cleansing, concentration camps, and the like. And you can fill in the blank for the various peoples around the world that have been subjected to that fear-based law. We did it. We did it in the 1940s. We gathered up Japanese and Japanese Americans, separated them from others, and put them in armed camps behind barbed wire. And yes, that was found to be unconstitutional, finally, by another set of Supreme Court justices, after originally the law was found to be valid. Sounds like what Ron DeSantis will do if he ever gets his hands on the White House doorknob. Putting that aside for a minute, what's happened now in the case? So in May, a group of Chinese Americans led by the ACLU filed a case in the Northern District of Florida up in Tallahassee near the governor's mansion and the legislature to try to stop by injunction this law from going into effect on July 1. The judge set a hearing that's going to take it out to July 18th. And he did not stay the law in the meantime. So it's going to be on the books for a short amount of time. Now, I don't have a lot of confidence in this particular judge handling it. And the judge is Alan Windsor. Used to be on the first department of the appellate courts in the state of Florida. Got elevated to the federal court by Donald Trump. Prior to that, he was the Solicitor General in Tallahassee for Pam Biondi, a right-wing MAGA former Attorney General, under Governor Rick Scott, also a Republican. So this guy's bona fides scare the living you-know-what out of me in terms of making the right decision. The Department of Justice has intervened in the case and filed a statement of interest. And in the statement of interest has said that the plaintiffs, the Chinese immigrants who have brought the case in a real estate company that's brought the case through the ACLU are right. They're going to win on equal protection. They're going to win on a due process violation. They're going to win on the violations of the Fair Housing Act and discrimination that will result. They're going to win on the supremacy clause that the federal government already regulates in this area, and therefore the states cannot. And the judge has given the state of Florida until the 3rd of July. How ironic, as we come close to our national independence for a country that's built on immigration, to have this decision made by Judge Windsor at the first level. Now, if he screws it up, which, my spidey senses are telling me he's going to, then that judge's decision is going to be taken on an appeal to the 11th Circuit. And if they screw it up, then it's going to go to the U.S. Supreme Court. It's an important decision. It comes down fundamentally to whether states led by MAGA right-wing like Ron DeSantis can discriminate against people because of their ethnicity. And the answer to that should be a resounding no. And so says Joe Biden's Justice Department. If we're going to give him credit for something, it's his Justice Department, and the Biden administration is taking a very active role to repel and to oppose laws like this one being proposed all around the country, whether it has to do with misguided, unpatriotic, unconstitutional attempts to limit land ownership and a backdoor way to discriminate, or abortion laws that are too restrictive and prevent a woman's right to choose. This is what the Department of Justice does every day. So for those that attack Merrick Garland for having gone too slow or been too cautious on Jan 6, he's got also other things that he's doing well. And from a moral standpoint, should line up with your values about how this Department of Justice operates. You didn't hear about suits like this when Donald Trump was in control of the Department of Justice through Jeff Sessions or Bill Barr, because they didn't file cases like this. You didn't hear about cases going after police departments in Minneapolis, Minnesota, because of bad policing, civil rights violations, because those things weren't filed under that regime, right? You only get people being held accountable for bad acts when you got proper people and adults in power, which is what we do now. I'm going to report on laws like this one, SB 264, and what's going to happen with it in the state of Florida, first through the federal judge appointed by Trump up to the 11th Circuit and the U.S. Supreme Court, right here only on the MeidasTouch Network, on Hot Takes I Do like this about every day. We pull stories together like this. We do a long-form podcast I co-founded and co-anchor on Wednesdays and Saturdays called Legal AF, only on, you guessed it, the MeidasTouch Network. You can give me a thumbs up here, leave a review. It helps. If you like what I'm doing, I'm Michael Popok. You can follow me on all things social media at MS Popok. This is Michael Popok, Legal AF reporting.
Hey, Meidas Mighty. Love this report? Continue the conversation by following us on Instagram at MeidasTouch to keep up with the most important news of the day. What are you waiting for? Follow us now.